Welcome back to Primed for Battle. Today we're going to be painting Ionus Cryptborn of the Stormcast Eternals, the Warden of Lost Souls, riding his Draconith Cathorak. Been some time since I've painted a Stormcast Eternal, going all the way back to 1st edition Age of Sigmar. But I can tell you that painting the dragon, and this especially, was particularly fun, and hopefully you enjoy and paint along with me. So let's jump right in. To begin, we're going to be using some Karak stone just to build up a base for the inside of the cloak. We probably need to do 2 or 3 thin coats just to get a nice smooth surface and layer on there for the cloak. And some of the areas in behind there might be a little bit tricky to get to, so just be mindful and you can correct any errors as you go. Following on from that, we use some Wraithbone just to build up over the top of the Karak stone on all the cape and the parchment and whatnot, and also on the bone areas, the skull mask, the lantern thing that he's holding, etc. And again, you may need to do 2 or 3 thin layers just to build up the smooth coat on this one. Then I've used some Phoenician purple on the outer side of the cape. And again, I've gone through with 2 or 3 thin layers of the purple just to build it up nice and consistently on the cloak over the black base coat. Then I've come through with Xerius purple, and I've just done this on the highest, areas of the cloak, leaving the darker shade of purple in the recesses, and again just building that up into some nice smooth layers. We're going to do a fairly quick and rough layer process for the outside of this cloak. And then finally, I've used some Genestealer purple just on the highest areas of the cloak, just on the very ridges, and applied that fairly roughly, just working my way around just to sort of catch the areas where the light would be hitting. Now in this step we're using some Flesh Tearers Red. I'm going to use that for the handle of the mace, and then also the cover of the book that he's carrying on his right hip. Applied this fairly thickly, allows it to build up and give some nice different tone depth and pooling in some of the recesses, but not too thick. Now I'm going through with Ironbreaker to get all the metallic silvery kind of parts of the armor. So all of the legs, the feet, the hands, the arms, etc. I basically just use the box art as a reference for the silver areas of the armor. Then I've gone through with Retributor armor for the gold areas. So predominantly it's the shoulder plates, shoulder pads, the detail on the lantern that he's holding, a little bit on his mace, some areas on his the knee pads, etc. The crown around his head. Then I've gone through to do the leather on the model. For this I've used Garagax Sewer, and I've applied that with a reasonable amount of thickness on the belt and the straps on the wrists, but feel free to use any of the various browns that you prefer or have in your collection for those leathery type colours. Next up, I've used some Pilar Glacier, and I've done this in the recesses around the skulls, predominantly his head and in the lantern, and then I've sort of shaded it into the side of the temples of the skull as well. It's a fairly light colour, so do a few passes and build it up to your preferred level of glowy blueness. Now I've used Nuln Oil and I've started applying it to the pages of the book just to shade those recesses in, and then applied it over all of the metallics. Be reasonably generous with this. You don't want it to pool too much, which can end up with some bad looking effects, but you want it to work a bit. Then I've used Corn Red moving on to the Draconith, and I've heavy sort of wet dry brush this over the entirety of the skin. As you can see, I'm being fairly liberal, just applying that all over in a nice sort of thick, fairly consistent coat. Doesn't leave too much of the black behind. And then I've used Evil Sun's Scarlet over the top of that. Again, I've taken a little bit more off the brush with this and dry brush that over the entirety, leaving a little bit of the Corn Red below. Each of these successive dry brush layers that I'm doing, I'm taking more and more of the paint off so that it acts more and more as a highlight. So you can see here with Wild Rider Red, I've focused this in on the head and then also some of the raised areas of the body, so the shoulders, the thighs, the legs, the hands, etc. A bit on the tail, just giving that sort of variation of colour across the various parts. And the wings also, same process, just really focusing in on the higher areas. As you can see, I'm really just roughly dragging the brush over all of those ridges and bony tendrils and things on the wings. Next up, I've used a very, very light dry brush of Lugganath Orange just around the face and then some of the raised areas of the body, such as the knuckles and the shoulders and thighs and things, just to really highlight a few of those prominent areas. And again, the same with the wings, just the really high ridges and the bony tendrils and things. Now I've gone through with Wraithbone just to pick out the underbelly. Again, probably 2 or 3 light coats, thin coats of to get all of these areas nice and smooth. I've worked my way through the tail and then underneath the belly right up through to the neck and underarms, etc. I've come back to Garagax Sewer just to do the leather straps on the saddle and various bits of armor and things that carry from the armor around under the neck, under the arms, the belly. Now in this step I'm using Black Templar. This is a semi-translucent black that just sort of allows some of the tone underneath to show through. So I'm using that for all of the hair that he has coming off of the fur, I guess, off the back of his limbs and also on either side of his chin. Now, time for the gold. For the gold on the dragon's armor, I'm using Balthazar gold. This is a nice deep coppery kind of gold, and you just want to go through. I find with this over a black undercoat usually benefits from 2 coats. So just work your way across the entirety of all of the armor around the chair or throne, I'm not sure. Then, just for something a little bit different from the red, I've used Sigvold Burgundy to fill in the sort of cushioning on the back of that chair. It's a nice, rich colour, and I'm quite fond. Now, time for a bit of focus on the mouth. So I'm using some Volupus Pink for the tongue. It is my go-to tongue colour, and I just use it fairly liberally on the tongue to let it pull up a bit in some areas. Acts as natural sort of highlights and shadows and stuff on the tongue when you use that right. If you get any on the teeth, don't worry too much. You can come back with Wraithbone and fix that up after. Then I've used some Carroburg Crimson just around the edges of the mouth. There's some sort of skin in the corners of his mouth, so I use that just to give it a nice sort of pink fleshy tone. Just a quick detail coming in with Imperial Fist, which is a single pigment yellow, and just using that to pick up the candle flames on the top part of the harness seat there, the saddle. And then later on I'll come back with a little bit of Nuln oil just to provide a bit of shading in that yellow. Next I'm using some Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to use that on all of the Wraithbone underbelly and also all of the Balthazar gold armor on the dragon, just to really shade in the recesses and bring a bit of different tone, a bit of an earthy tone to that underbelly, and provide some really nice shading on the gold. Now on the home stretch with the base, we're starting with Leadbelcher just on the arch metallic structure underneath the stone, and just apply that over all of that area. You can be a little messy with this. Then I've used some Rhinox hide. I've applied this over all of the stone as a base. I've dry brushed it also a little bit over the sand texture. Again, don't need to be too particular with it here. You can always fix up areas as you go. I've just gone back quickly to the Draconeth, and in the Baden Black I'm just writing in the scripture on the scrolls. And what I usually do with scripture is I do tiny little squiggles with a nice pointed brush. Try to make sure the paint's very thin so that it'll flow on smoothly from the brush. I just apply little tiny scribbles with little gaps. And you can see I've also tried to draw a little twin-tailed comet in there for old Sigmar. But yeah, generally just small little squiggles in a straight line with some gaps and things. You can fill in some space with a cross or comet or a little skull if you are so inclined. So I've come through with Doomball Brown and dry brushed that over the rhinal side fairly heavily. I haven't taken too much off the brush. This is just going to build up some different colour textures on that stone. And again, I've dry brushed it a bit over the texture paint on the base as well. Next, I've used a smaller, cheap brush. You don't want to do this with a good brush. And I've used Towelite Ochre. And I've sort of used a smaller brush so that I've got a little bit more direct control over how I'm dry brushing it. And then I've applied that over all of the stonework again. In this step, I'm going to use some Dawnstone just to dry brush quite heavily over the stone, just to start bringing that stone look over all of the browner sort of creamy tones that I've used previously. Now going through over the Dawnstone with just a very light dry brush of Corax White. This will really highlight all of the edges and the raised areas and just really start to accentuate that stonish look. Now I'm going to go through with some wildwood and just pick out the, I guess the vine or sort of branch tree sort of thing that's growing up over the stone on the base there. All of the dry brushing and stuff we've done in previous steps will help bring out some different tones under that brown. From there, I'm going to use some Coelia green shade and just fill in all of the cracks in the stone. This will help bring a bit of earthy sort of moss, sort of mouldy tones into the cracks. In the final step, I'm going to use some Fugan Orange just on the steel frame underneath, just to bring in a little bit of rust kind of look. Just go around and put it into the recesses and just as I feel. And with that, we are done. I hope you enjoy the video. It's been a long time in the works. A lot of life obstacles getting in the way, but it's been a joy. And thanks for watching. As always, if you could like and subscribe, it'd really help. And I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.